Yes, so some of you know about Mothers Can, and some of you don't. So we're going to share a little bit about Mothers Can to start with, and then I'm going to invite one of our latest participants from our Anxiety to Action course along to speak as well. So yeah, we're just going to spend 5-10 minutes doing that, and then we're going to get into hearing from Rachel. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. So Mothers Climate Action Network started 4 years ago when a group of concerned mothers, like many of us tonight, came together and realised that despite their efforts towards personal actions, such as recycling and things like clothes swaps, nothing was changing on a wider scale. And you may be feeling like that tonight too. It became clear to them that collective action, taking action with others in their communities, was the most impactful way to make change. We believe, as Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. This has built the foundations of what we believe in at Mothers Can. Our mission is to build the confidence, leadership, and community organising skills of mothers like you so that you can become grassroots climate leaders within the groups you are part of and work with others to make change happen. To do this, we meet you where you're at. For mums who have never taken action before, we provide community organising training through our fully funded 5-week Anxieties Action course, which we'll talk about in a moment. This builds mums' confidence and leadership skills to understand the importance of organising and collective action in community groups. We invite those mums to become part of the network and provide monthly sessions, bringing the whole network together to facilitate peer-to-peer support. This includes learning and sharing sessions to provide inspiration and extra training opportunities to continue our learning to build our knowledge and skills. This encourages mums to use their learning about organising and take an active role in groups to make impactful change. We also offer one-to-one coaching to those mums who want to bring together their own groups. This provides support and accountability whilst they build their group within their local area, workplace, or wherever it may be. To be able to invite more mums like you into our network, we run these speaker sessions like tonight for you to find out more about us and how you can get involved. So if you like what you hear this evening, get in touch. Our email address is in the chat now. Mothers Can is built by mums for mums, and we offer the flexibility needed to enable mums to do this work in a supportive and meaningful way. We are volunteer run and rely on the participation and engagement of those mums who get involved to build and grow what we do. Personally, for me, being part of Mothers Can has been a huge learning journey. From changing my perspective on how to make meaningful and impactful change in my community and through my work, as well as building my confidence, knowledge, and skills around community organising, which I use nearly every day as part of my job and also as chair of my school PTA. We welcome you all here tonight and hope that some of you will want to be part of Mothers Can with us to make change happen together. With this in mind, I am going to invite Letty, who was a participant in our latest cohort of our Anxiety to Action course, to speak to you all about the course and what she got out of it. So Letty, if you'd like to take yourself on mute, you have. Lovely. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you so much for joining us, Letty, and of being willing to be someone who speaks tonight. So my first question to you is, why did you sign up to the Anxiety to Action course?
Sorry that everything's so dark where I am, everybody. Hopefully you can just about see me, but make out what I'm saying. I joined the course because on my maternity leave, I had time to really reflect on what I wanted to do and sort of what was important to me. And I realized that I had been avoiding the issue of climate justice in my life because it was making me feel so anxious. And so I decided that rather than avoiding it, I wanted to try and find a way to cultivate hope and to learn more about it. And I also really recognize that as my daughter grows up, I want to see her. I want her to see me taking action and doing what I can, but I also want to find ways to model how to cope better with anxiety, better than just avoiding it. I want her to see somebody who's kind of living alongside it, but making positive change and connecting with others to try and kind of work through that. So yeah, And
Thanks,
then I found
Letty.
Mothers Can.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, yeah, I definitely resonate with what you said there. I think a lot of us can, yeah, are feeling the same thoughts that as you are there. Um, can you tell us three things that you learned on the course?
Yes. I've got some notes. Um, uh, One of the things I really loved about the course is that there's constantly examples from people who are currently doing it from the collective. So that's really valuable because you get really great insights into, how to apply the learning all the way through. Um, we learned about different ways of organizing, and at Mothers Can we prioritize broad-based community organizing. So then that led us to learning about power and how to cultivate power and thinking about power differently. So thinking more about relational power, which is about a sort of shared power. um, and it's not about doing it all yourself because that's not sustainable. So it's about sharing that power to make the change happen that you want to see. And so the next thing we learn, which is so pivotal in the Mothers Can approach, is the power of the one-to-one, which are purposeful, meaningful conversations that you can have with other individuals to kind of share your values and figure out where they're at, and invite them into what you're doing, and to hear about what they're passionate about. Um, and then the sort of third thing that I learned was that we do need everyone to join. So no matter how introverted or extroverted, how much of an expert you are on this subject or whatever, we've all got a role to play. And one of the speakers shared this really great kind of pictogram of all the different types of organizers that we need. And it was things like researchers, the team makers, the deep thinkers, the public speakers, the fundraisers, the designers, the filmmakers. It was just everyone. Um, and I really love the idea of being able to kind of use the skills I have to make change, but also to stretch myself and learn from other people. Um, yeah.
Letty, I think that's you covered so much there. What was on
Okay.
the course? Thank you so much. Yeah, and I love how you mentioned how we brought in some of the other mums from the network, as well as we've said in the introduction, like every single mum that's part of our network helps us build what we're doing, and we try and pull them in at every opportunity, and especially through the training as well to set that great example. So thank you so much for mentioning them.
Oh, they were
Um,
amazing. They were so great.
and then my final question is, what are you going to do now that you've completed the course? And obviously you're still with us in our network and we're providing support as we go along, but yeah, what are your plans?
Yeah, so I think this is really important. The whole course through, we're talking about accountability, and then at the end, we're invited to make a pledge. And I committed to setting up a local group to where I am. Um, but what's really great is, I had it in my head that I needed to do that next week, and actually, Lindsay and Sophie kind of supported me to realize that that might take a year, and that that's okay, and that every conversation is so vital. And that if I rush, I'm just going to burn out, and then that's not helping anyone. So again, it was kind of about pacing myself and doing things in a realistic kind of way. And then what I've really appreciated about that since is that, Lindsay and Sophie are giving so much more support to us, as well as the cohort I travelled with. We're all kind of still talking a lot of the time. My buddy from the course, we talk, and that's really helpful. And also the wider collective. So there's just so much support built in to help make that pledge a reality. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Letty. And we really appreciate you, one, for talking tonight, but also for being part of the course. So thank you so much, Letty.
Oh, thank you.
With that in mind, we have our next Anxiety to Action course starting on Wednesday, the 25th of February. And you can apply now. I was going to share the link and I've lost it here now. So I'm going to share that in the chat. So if you're interested and you like the sound of what you've heard, please do get in touch with us or fill in the application form, and we'd love to see you as part of our next cohort. I'm going to hand you over to Sophie now.
Thank you very much. Great to meet you all. I'm Sophie. I run Mothers Can with Lindsay, and I'm going to just add a pin onto. So I'm going to remove Lindsay's pin, so then you might be able to see me. And I'm going to, in a minute, I'm going to welcome Rachael Orr. Actually, many of you might already know Rachael, but Rachael is from Climate Outreach, which is a brilliant organisation that helps us people and organisations just tell better climate stories. And that means we can inspire more climate action. Before that, she's been in lots of different policy positions, like in Shelter and at Oxfam and at Place Shapers. So she's got loads and loads of experience. I've had a great pleasure of working with Rachael and knowing Rachael for quite some time now, and I've seen her speak on a couple of occasions. But I was going to say, just a few weeks ago, I was actually feeling pretty despondent, I have to say. I just wasn't feeling particularly well, and I think with the rise of reform and all this feeling like climate was just falling off the agenda, I was at a conference, and Rachael pretty much opened the conference, and her positivity and her confidence just absolutely, like, I came out just like, she has to come and speak for us. She has to come and speak. She has to share this message. She is the right speaker right now. So I am so delighted that she has agreed to come and speak today to all of us. So I'm going to now hand you over to Rachael.
Oh, Sophie, what an introduction. Thank you. So I am going to attempt to share my screen. Let me, it's seamless earlier when, there we go. Oh, not at the beginning. It's not helpful. Can everyone see that? Yes, excellent, great. So yeah, thanks so much for having me this evening. As Sophie said, I am the CEO of Climate Outreach, but maybe more relevant for this evening, I am a mum to Ella and Cami, who are 9 and 6. And pester me all the time about not driving a car till they want me to take them swimming, and the things that we should be doing more of at home to help save the planet. And my biggest win on framing and messaging in the last year is rebranding their school Eco Warriors group to Eco Champions. Reasons for which may become clearer as I kind of make my way through the insights that I'm about to share. So yeah, Climate Outreach does an awful lot of research and then tries to kind of translate that to help people and organisations to tell the most effective climate stories. And over the last year, we've been running a piece of research called Britain Talks Climate and Nature. So we spoke to over 7,000 people. We ran lots of kind of workshops with people working on climate and nature, kind of communications and community engagement. And then we ran some nationally representative surveys in Scotland and England and Wales. And then we did a number of focus groups and narrative workshops where we really try and kind of dig into kind of core messages that work with different audiences. So I'm going to run through a lot. I will share the slides afterwards. I've just dropped a link into the chat where you can find a whole lot more kind of data and insights from this work. But if you're going to kind of take away 3 key things from what I'm going to say this evening, first of all, there's far more to be excited and energized about than there is to be fearful when we kind of take a big helicopter view of how people think and feel about climate and nature right now. There is jeopardy. I don't want to kind of pretend anything otherwise, but there's infinite opportunity if we can just think a bit more about how we're getting the messages right and how we're engaging with people on climate and nature and the environment. And I think this is really, really important. Like, people really do care more than many think, but that shows up in a lot of different ways. For people on this call, it shows up in kind of wanting to do more and take action. And that is amazing and inspiring. It doesn't show up like that for everybody, but that doesn't mean they're not worried, and it doesn't mean they don't care. But we just have to think differently about how we kind of speak to them and try and bring them with us. So the Britain Talks Climate work is built on a segmentation model, an audience segmentation model. So what we do is we look across the population, and then we kind of divide people into 7 groups. And the groups are not by age or demographics. They're based on values. So we work with the think tank More in Common, and we do a kind of deep dive into people's kind of values and worldviews, and then use this segmentation to think about how different people respond differently to different kind of messaging on climate and nature. So the circle you can see in the middle is roughly the proportion of the population that each of these different segments make up. I'm not going to go into them all in a great deal of detail. I'll come back to a couple of key segments at the end. But what the little descriptors underneath all of the segment headings do is try and summarize sort of in a sentence how you would engage with each of these segments on climate. And as you can see, for some, it might be easier than others, but there is a way in with everybody. So the three key findings from our extensive Britain Talks climate research. First of all, we are a nation of nature lovers and we want to protect our environment. Whenever we do work on climate, people talk about nature and their care for nature. But I think for me, this came through even more strongly this time. And the kind of joy that people talk about in kind of parks, national parks, beaches, and people talk about their pride in us protecting that environment. But as you won't have failed to notice, trust in society, politics, and governments is collapsing. And this lack of trust is just colouring how people view everything, including climate change. So it's not that people are feeling more or less negative about how they feel about climate. There's just a massive trust deficit that people think governments in particular and big institutions in general are going to be able to step up to do what we need them to do. And our last finding is we think climate action has got a bit of an image problem. But we also think it's really fixable, and I'm going to get into how in the course of the next few minutes. So to kind of delve into that in a little more detail, we're a nation of nature lovers and we want to protect the environment. So we asked people, if this is a free text box in a survey. So the first word cloud, we said, in a word or two, how do you feel when you think about climate change? And you can see the things that people say most prominently. And then the next word cloud, again, how do you feel about the impact that people have on the environment and the natural world? So we're worried, we're disappointed, we're sad. And then we said to people, how do you feel, how proud do you feel of the action that we might take to kind of protect and restore natural places in the UK? So we gave people a sliding scale, 0 to 100, and a list of different things. And as you can see, there's huge pride that people feel in planting trees, stopping litter, recycling. But there's also a lot of pride in kind of renewable energy, which I'll come back to in a bit more detail. So as you can see from this, and we find again and again, like people are worried about climate change and they care more deeply than we realise. So 3/4 of people said that they think climate change is important. And about 2/3 of us say we're worried about it. But really crucially, I think people really underestimate how much other people worry. So they think, well, I'm worried, but I'm not sure that other people are. And it was really interesting. We asked people, well, if you're worried about it, like, what do you do with that worry? And people were like, well, I just don't think about it. If I'm worried about something and I'm scared about something, I don't want to think about it. So I joke often with Helen Meach at the Climate Coalition, like when most people are worried about something, they back away from it. Climate activists lean into it, but we're different from a lot of people. But it doesn't mean they're not worried. It doesn't mean they don't think this is important. The next finding I also think is really crucial. So we asked the people who said they weren't worried about climate change, why not? And only 4% said they weren't worried about climate change because they don't think it's real. I've been part of a number of panels in the last 6 months where climate advocates have started by saying, there's a growth in climate denialism in the UK. That is, excuse my French, bollocks. And we have a massively important role in calling that out, because if we start saying climate denial is rising, then we're just going to kind of perpetuate something that isn't true. Bots on social media perpetuating climate denialism is rising, and Reform UK have a couple of prominent politicians who have a big megaphone, but across the country this is not true and we need to not say it. And a lot of support for ambitious climate action. This, I think, kind of illustrates this really clearly. So which of the following comes closest to your view? So the red block are basically people saying that they're worried. The slightly paler red is people saying I'm worried, but I don't think about it too much. and the kind of scale down the side is about people's kind of financial situation and how that impacts. But, you know, people are worried. It's just about how much they're kind of thinking about it and talking about it. Trust in society, politics and governments is collapsing, and that's the lens through which we're seeing climate change. I find this really difficult as well, as a human, but as a mum. You know, when we ask people, what world do you think future generations will inherit? People talked about feeling worried, uncertain, real kind of concerns about climate, about the rise of AI. And people talked about, I think my kids' prospects will be worse than my parents were. A big sense that government and businesses have a kind of vested interest and don't stick up for people like me. And two of those audience segments that I flagged at the beginning, the traditional conservatives and the dissenting disruptors, they're harder to engage on climate generally and are skeptical of the concept of net zero. This was a kind of typical quote in the focus groups that we ran. So this is from the segment Skeptical Scroller in Glasgow. She said, I think the government, they're almost hiding behind it all and scared to admit that there's a problem here. They're acting like they're all over it, but I don't think they actually know what they're doing. And kind of there's the distrust in government, there's the kind of fear for the future, and then there's the fears about cost, which are very kind of valid and real for people. So people would say things a lot like, well, I'd love a heat pump, but they're not for people like me. I'd love an EV, but people like me can't afford that. So there's obviously an engagement job to do as some of that technology gets more affordable. But there is also still a big kind of policy challenge about the expense of some of the bits of climate technology that we're really trying to kind of ask people to take up. Again, kind of people feeling sort of let down and broken promises. But when we ask people, do you think if the government scrapped plans to tackle climate change, it would save you money? People didn't think so. So climate action has an image problem, but it's fixable. We found that people were feeling less trusting of people who are part of protest or activist groups. That's been on a bit of a steady decline over the last few years. I think that's kind of two things. One is a general kind of lack of trust in, as I said, kind of big brands and big institutions. And people mentioned time and time again the one protest that Just Stop Oil did a number of years ago, where they blocked a tube train with people going to work in London. And that is stuck in people's minds. And it's really totemic that this is kind of what all climate activism is. And it stops ordinary people getting to work. The other thing that came up far more strongly than I've had before is a real kind of distrust of statistics. So you'd show people some kind of facts or science, and they'd initially kind of engage with it. And then a couple of segments in particular, they'd be like, yeah, well, you can kind of make the stats say whatever you want to say. And I think that's a really kind of worrying trend. But the flip side of that is there's lots that we can build on in terms of what people do trust as kind of effective messengers, which I'll say some more about in a couple of minutes. Oh, hang on, I missed the slide. And as well, in terms of that distrust, the other term that I'm sure you will have spotted is becoming kind of weaponized by some is the kind of phrase net zero. A lot of people still don't know what it means. For kind of really obvious reasons, if you don't spend your head in climate policy and politics. And for some, it's become a bit of a kind of lightning rod of these kind of unfair policies that will just be imposed on them. But still, nearly 50% of people think getting to net zero will be good for the UK, 16% think it will be bad. I think that's a relatively good set of numbers, but what the doomsayers will say is the trend is trending down, and it was slightly higher than that last year. There's some kind of room for balance in that, I think. The other thing that I think I've really noticed, it came through in a couple of our focus groups, especially with the progressive activist segment, but certainly something I'm finding in with a lot of people working in this sector at the moment. It feels like we've lost our confidence a bit. And I hope what some of these insights will show you is like, we should think of ourselves as the winning team. We are not making progress as fast as any of us know we need to, but there's a huge amount of worry and concern and support and people who are with us. But we're in a fight now. If any of you have heard Ed Miliband speak recently, he's kind of banging the drum, and I think he's right. So how do we kind of keep building on the support that we still have, rather than letting it kind of drain away? The first thing that we should do is we should talk a lot about clean energy. People are really positive about it. They're really proud of it. I know that with renewable energy infrastructure, you quite often hear voices of people who are feeling uncomfortable about new infrastructure in their communities. We wanted to see what kind of the quiet majority thought. So we asked people if they like or didn't mind seeing wind turbines, solar panels, etc. 15% of people say they don't like seeing wind turbines in the countryside, 85% saying that they are kind of broadly supportive or don't mind or don't notice them. That's true across the political spectrum. So 75% of people intending to vote Reform or Conservative said they like or don't mind seeing wind turbines in the countryside. So when their political leaders are trashing renewable energy, it is not what their voter base thinks. We also asked a few questions, especially in Wales and Scotland, about the kind of renewable energy industries versus the kind of heritage industries. So more people in Wales think moving away from coal was a good thing than a bad thing. And as someone who grew up in Scotland, I was especially proud of this stat. So people in Scotland more proud of the offshore wind industry than the North Sea oil and gas industry. This is one of my favourite charts from our research. People love solar. People love the fact that the sun is creating power that can heat their homes. People think solar panels are something folk like me could have. People had stories of their neighbour getting solar panels on their garage and their bills coming down. And this, all the red on here, this is across the segments, people saying they kind of like or don't mind seeing solar panels on people's roofs. So a kind of massive opportunity to be rolling out solar panels far and wide. And the other kind of really key thing, kind of building on that support for renewable energy, is we have to, if we're going to kind of fix the image problem that climate action can have, we have to talk about the progress we've already made. You know, we would have people anecdotally in groups saying, well, have we done anything on this yet? So we asked people, do you know how much of the UK's electricity is currently made from renewables? Most people estimated between 10 and 15%. And when we said, oh, the actual answer is more than 50%, this is the kind of word cloud of how people told us that made them feel. So to kind of wrap that all up in terms of what we think are the big sort of communications recommendations, as far as we can, we need to be talking to everyone about this. And the messaging framing that works best across all of those segments, the one that's most likely to kind of, be effective for as many people as possible, is talking about protecting the environment, investing in a more prosperous society and a better future for everybody. As much as we can, start conversations about climate by foregrounding that real care that we have for nature, and build on a widespread but often quiet and quite British concern and desire for action. A lot of people said to us, I'm already doing things. A lot of people said I'm doing as much or more than I have done in previous years to protect the environment. I'm going on litter picks in my community. I'm recycling. I'm taking my shopping bag when I go shopping. I'm thinking about if I can get an EV next time I get a car. Like, people are doing things, but it's kind of much quieter and again, not being shouted about. And then how do we really kind of invite people in and try and kind of sell the better future that we think is possible by tackling climate change? As I said, talking about the progress we've already made is really critical. Think about how we can talk about investing in a future without trashing the past. So I think this is really interesting in terms of the kind of shift from fossil fuels to renewables. A lot of people, most people get it. They get that that's what we should do and we need to do, but they say, don't kind of, I'm proud of the fact that we had an oil industry. I'm proud of the fact my uncle went and, did a hard job offshore to power our homes, but we need to do something different in future. So how can we kind of build on that pride for jobs that have gone before and pull that into the kind of jobs of the future? And what people really want to see at the moment is tangible local benefits. Can I see and feel it in my neighbourhood? This is not a moment where kind of talking about global agreements and kind of lofty targets is what people want to hear. They want to know about the solar panels on the roof of the school or the district heating system that's heating up their swimming pool. And as I said, I think this point about net zero and how we connect it to what it's for and what it does is really crucial. And to give you an example of what I mean, we asked people a hypothetical question. So we said, if your council said they were setting a target to reach net zero emissions by 2045, would you support it? That got 50% support. And then we said, your council is setting a target to reach net zero emissions by 2045 by providing a cleaner and more reliable energy supply, improving public transport and creating new jobs. 64% supported this. And then we said, would you support a local climate policy that benefits people's health and happiness, makes the area safer to live in, protects nature, working for a sustainable future for our children and the next generations? 78%. As a communications professional, I'm very aware that the last box has a lot more words in it than just reaching net zero emissions. But I think, you know, something for us all to take is the kind of shorthand of, we're doing this to get to net zero. If it has ever worked, certainly won't work at the moment. Why we're doing this is to make our lives and our world and our communities better. I'm aware there's been an awful lot in that. I did just want to touch on a couple of other things. So one was, I said I wasn't going to go into these segments, and I'm not. But I will go out on a limb and say that I imagine that the vast majority of people on this call would fall into the progressive activist segment. This is a summary of our progressive activists. We make up 12% of the population. And in some ways, we're quite similar to the other segments, but in some ways, we're not. And I think it's really important that we keep that front of mind when we're thinking about effective climate communication. So this is a little kind of plot of some of the differences and similarities that we find across the segments. And I just maybe ask you to look at where the little yellow progressive activist blob sits compared to some of the other segments. Obviously, a couple of these are not about climate. So the top one about trust in elites and politics and optimism about the state of the world. But the two in the middle, kind of motivated by global issues and want radical action on climate change. The progressive activist segment, we're a bit of an outlier, as you can see. And yeah, I guess I just kind of encourage people to see where the other segments sit on some of these. But also, kind of a lot of other segments do want ambitious action on climate. And people who say they don't want ambitious action, it's not that they don't want action, it's more about the kind of pace of change. And the final plot graph here, we tested a lot of kind of frequently used terms, co-benefits, just transition, net zero, climate justice. And actually, we found that pretty much every segment, including quite a lot of the progressive activists, hadn't heard them, didn't use them, didn't know what they meant. So I think there's something really important in terms of what are the terms that we are using when we're speaking to segments who are outside of some of the circles that we maybe spend more of our time in. And the final thing I just wanted to finish on, given what I saw in the chat about everybody here kind of doing, and that brilliant introduction about the kind of training that is offered. Just some kind of thoughts from us to think about in terms of effective climate communication. So we did some research last year about how people, anybody could build trust as a climate communicator. And we did this by running a number of focus groups, and we gave people little videos of different people speaking about climate, and then asked them how they responded to them emotionally, if they trusted them, and if so, why. And our kind of summary of this was that to be a really effective climate communicator, you need 3 key attributes. You need passion. Now, that can come from your professional life, but it can come from your personal life. You need credibility. Again, why does this matter to you? And that doesn't have to be a science degree, but you have to be able to show that credibility. And finally, empathy. And the thing about empathy is, does this communicator understand me or people like me and my perspective? And in my experience, some climate activists can score very well on passion and very well on credibility. And sometimes it's the empathy with a different audience that we need to work on a little bit. I still think that a lot of people expect when they are talking to a climate activist that we're going to lecture them or we're going to make them feel guilty. And neither of those are effective ways to kind of engage people and make them feel that they are being listened to. So we would suggest that if you're thinking about your climate communication, can you answer these questions? What's motivating me to communicate? And do I have a genuine interest in understanding where my audience is coming from? There is absolutely a role for kind of sharing our passion and sharing the reasons why we care about this. But if it's going to be a genuinely kind of two-way dialogue, then we need to be thinking about a couple of these questions too. And then very, very finally, here are three kind of easy, well, they seem easy, three things that we think all climate communicators can do. So find common ground with your audience, convey your passion as well as your credibility, and make sure the messenger fits the message. So that may well be you, but sometimes it might not be. And maybe there's more that we can do to support other people to be sharing our message about kind of climate and nature. I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was brilliant. That was like a big old climate hug.
Good.
When I heard you speak at the Green Alliance conference, you said one of the most depressing moments that you had during doing the research was when you were in a group of progressives.
Yeah.
And you said that everyone just had lost their confidence, and it just
Yep.
felt, and when you said that, I was thinking, what are you going to say? You're in a group of progressives, it's got to sound, it's got to be positive. And actually, it just felt like, oh, everyone had, felt. And with all of those things, I was thinking, I was madly making notes, thinking, oh my God, I've got to remember this. I've got to remember this. We are not a nation of climate deniers. We just don't think others are doing as much as we are, but they are. And I heard a great term the other day, which was a bit about the language. So someone said, just make sure that you're not asking everyone to do a purity test. It's like everyone cares. You just got to let them care. It's not that we've all got to be better than each other. So yes, no. Thank you very much for that. This is an opportunity for anybody to ask questions. If you have questions for Rachel, please. You can take yourself off mute. You can ask a question. You can or put your hand up and we'll come to you, or post something in the chat. When I obviously many years ago saw you do the original Britain Talks Climate, and then this is obviously the updated version. I mean, were there any kind of startling reveals? Were there some things that you went, oh my goodness, I didn't expect that,
So we kind of intentionally didn't ask exactly the same set of questions. Obviously, there are some that are pretty similar, but we thought about that, and we thought about, do we want this to feel like a kind of trend piece of work? But we actually thought, like, the world feels quite different now to 5 years ago, and we want to ask the questions that we think need to be answered right now, and that was really front of mind. One thing that we definitely saw was the kind of expressed concern for people outside of the UK has gone down. So when we ask people, why are you kind of worried about climate change? When we asked this question 5 years ago, two of the segments, the progressive activists and one other, said their kind of top concern was the impact on the poorest people in the world. That wasn't even the top answer for progressive activists this time. It was harm to nature and wildlife. That's what came top. But it didn't, that answer, we gave people 10 answers to rank, and it fell out of the top 5 for pretty much every segment. So there's definitely a kind of, as I say, people are looking kind of to local and community far more than they're looking at the kind of global picture. And that was kind of emphasized when we did these sort of narrative workshops. So we tested 3 or 4 different narratives about what would make people kind of more engaged and supportive of climate action. So we tested one that was all about jobs. We tested one. We actually took quite a lot of what Desnes was using and tested it, and then showed it back to them to show them they should change it. But we tested something that was kind of cool benefit language. And then we tested one that was all about local and community. And that was the one that really spoke to people. They said that feels like it's been written like someone like me for someone like me. So that was really stark to me. The stuff about net zero as a term wasn't coming up 5 years ago. And there was something really interesting in that COVID was a real lightning rod for. We didn't pick it up in the survey, but in focus groups, you'd hear people say things like, well, I was losing trust anyway, and then COVID happened, and that was just the end for me. And interestingly, well, you're expecting me to trust governments to tackle climate change. They had to do COVID, and look at what a mess they made of that. So it was almost like COVID was really bad for two reasons. It was the kind of lack of trust, and governments can't be trusted to do big things. And then I guess the final more positive trend was, as I said, I think kind of care for nature came through more strongly. People feeling connected to nature. And actually linked to that, people not noticing the impacts of climate change now is stronger than it was 5 years ago. I mean, we were doing this in the early summer and when it was already hot, but people said, I see that it's flooding more. I see that the weather's strange. This isn't just weather, is it? This is the climate starting to change. So the impacts were being noticed more.
And do you think that also could have an impact on people not thinking of people overseas? And maybe 5 years pre-COVID, that's what we were all looking at, because
Yep.
and then now actually we're seeing the impacts at home. So we're seeing it's much more live for us right now. And so people
Yep.
are thinking, well, it's happening over here. I've got to worry about myself, my family, my community.
Exactly. And I think, again, climate isn't separate from other things. So it's basically people are like, I feel really worried. I feel really skint. Everything's got more expensive. My pay packet hasn't gone up. I'm worried about everything, but I don't think the government can fix it. And they don't think that more or less when it comes to climate, as opposed to, education or prisons, or, it's kind of, I'm in a really tight spot here and life feels hard and I don't know when it's going to feel much easier. The really interesting thing is when we said to people, you could get solar panels on your roof and you could lower your energy bills and things. It was like, there's a possibility that part of the way of lifting this gloom that I feel could be some of the solutions to climate change. People were really receptive to that. If you frame climate policy as an investment in your home, an investment in your neighborhood, people really want to hear more about it. And that might be because they feel like their place hasn't been invested in for 10 years, but that's fine. I'm fine with that, right? If they're clamoring to hear more about investment, like, let's talk about that and let's tell the government they need to be doing more of it. So yeah, it wasn't that kind of climate was separate from those other worries and kind of worldviews. It was all wrapped up in it.
I just so I feel like I'm asking all the questions. So please, if you have questions for Rachel, please, this I can talk about this stuff all day. So and I will.
There's a couple in the
But I
chat.
have a hand up. So I'm going to come back to my question and get Catherine to come off mute and ask a question.
Hi, thanks very much, Rachel. I think people are kind of asking similar things in the chat as well, but I was just interested in how you can build or project credibility, given that people don't trust statistics, they don't really trust activists. So how can we do that?
So I think connect on a kind of emotional level. So people don't trust facts and stats, really. They matter less than we think. Whereas actually, your personal story, why does this matter to you? Why do you care about it? And that could be, I've seen X, because I'm a climate activist, or it could be I spent 3 winters watching my village get flooded, and that's why I care about it, and that's why I kind of want things to be better. So I think, why does this matter to you, and kind of making it personal, understanding that people might not kind of come with you, but I think you can always find some common ground. Like, what are the things that you're worried about or you're noticing in terms of the kind of impacts of climate change, and then kind of moving into, what do you think we need to do about it? And I think as much as possible, if we can be asking people questions and listening to them, or at least starting there, then that sets us up in a much kind of better stead. But I think the other thing to say, and I meant to say this at the beginning, right? This isn't easy, and it's really not easy right now. And I think people who are still really committed to it and really passionate and leaning into it more are amazing. And I don't think we say that enough. I always feel when I go and talk to activists and kind of say, people don't love activists. I don't want that to come across as stop being an activist or stop doing this or stop caring. That's the opposite of what we need. I think it's just understanding, when you say this, people like you will hear what you want them to hear, but some other people might hear something different. So how can you kind of adjust your language a bit? Climate justice is a kind of key term. You say that to a lot of people and they're like, what, putting people in prison? because justice for them is like literal. I always remember I did a focus group a couple of years ago with some social housing residents and talked about retrofit. And a couple of people were like, you mean the 50s? Because it's retro, so it's the 50s. And it like just people just hear things really literally. So I just think we just have to be really, really aware of that and aware of the kind of terms that we're using, so that we can kind of, try and kind of connect with people where they are.
Brilliant. I have just noticed there's lots of questions in the chat, which I hadn't noticed before. So, Judy, Judy, do you want to come off mute and ask a question? I don't mind asking it for you, but I'm also happy to invite anybody off mute if they want to ask themselves.
Yeah, I'll come off mute and on video as well. Hello there. I'm just asking, what you're saying, is it applying only to white people? Most people are in urban areas, and the percentage of the multicultural population is really high. So do you speak differently to white people and multicultural people?
I try my best not to, but again, I try my best to kind of listen, first of all. So the research that we did, it was nationally representative. So both kind of across age demographics. We've got a breakdown of all the findings by ethnicity and religion. We've just kind of pulled all that data. So I'm really happy to share that with you, Judy, if you'd like to see that in terms of how that sort of differs. It is interesting, I think, when you go to different communities, and different communities do have different kind of views and different experiences of climate change. And that point about the kind of global story, Climate Outreach in the last sort of 6 months has been doing some work with diaspora communities. And obviously they have a very different perspective and view and starting point in terms of their story of climate change. And I actually think one of the ways that we need to kind of help regain that story of this being a kind of global issue is to hear more and more from those voices, and kind of their perspectives. So no, this isn't just research kind of conducted with white people or kind of insights that are for white people, but it's not really, really tailored to a specific group or kind of ethnicity or heritage.
But my question really is, using that information, do you think there's a different way of talking to white people and to multicultural people? I mean, especially as you say, the multicultural dimension in the world is so strong now. So do you need to sort of raise that with white people?
Do you need to raise kind of talking about different race
global
and
issues?
I think it depends what you're trying to achieve. I think it depends what you want that conversation to do, because as I said, more and more people, and this, I don't think this is just true for white people, more and more people are going, I want to see progress and I want to see change in the place that I live. The place that I live doesn't feel like it's getting better, and I want to see that changing. So like that is where I would be starting conversations. As I say, I think there are some people in communities who have their kind of reference point in a much more kind of global picture, but it's not where most people are. I think if there was do we think it is important as a kind of community, as a movement, that we talk more about global issues on climate change and build a campaign there? I mean, I totally get behind that, but I think it depends what you're trying to do with your communication.
Okay, thank you. There's quite a few more questions in the chat, so I'm going to just ask the next one. The next one was from Florence Miller, and she was saying, which I now can't find, but I do remember that it was saying about, did you do any testing around particular messengers who are particularly trusted, medical professionals, etc., farmers, kind of forums where the conversations about climate are particularly helpful? Beyond one-to-one.
So we've done quite a bit of testing on messengers. We did some in this research, and we also asked people. So the person who always comes up as the most trusted messenger on climate is Sir David Attenborough. This year, and this always gets an interesting reaction, this year I would say he was closely followed by Jeremy Clarkson. So for a lot of people, Clarkson is an effective messenger because they think Clarkson's farm really shows you the impacts of climate change and how difficult it is for farmers to respond to a changing climate. And actually, people like the fact that he's changed his mind. So people will say things like he used to be a skeptic and then he became a farmer and he actually saw the impact of climate change and now he thinks differently about climate change, and people think that's quite real and quite human. So Clarkson is seen as quite an effective messenger by a lot of people. The royals are seen to get this right. The king's seen as someone who's had a kind of lifelong commitment on this, and people think Prince William gets his kind of comms right on this. But then, yes, broadly, doctors, nurses are seen as trusted. Climate scientists are, although they often speak in a bit too much fact and not quite enough human. But people think they have kind of huge amounts of credibility. And then I think the one thing that I would love to do more on, and I don't think we got to in this research, is almost like, who are younger people really listening to talk about climate? So we had an opportunity to do some work with some kind of content creators, which I couldn't get funded. But I'd love to do some more of that in future, because I think quite a lot of our messengers are bluntly like the things that people bring up, and the people that people bring up are mainly older white men, and that is not like they're the people who people recall. But I do think there's kind of a whole other generation out there that we need to learn more about, and learn more about them pretty fast.
Great, thank you. Ellen, do you want to just come off mute and ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. Coming back to Catherine's point about kind of finding that common ground. I remember ages ago, somebody said to me, people can't dispute your feelings, but they can dispute facts. So actually, if you find that touch point to start with, and you go into it and say, I'd like to have a conversation about this because I'm scared about what's going to happen for my kids, or I'm scared about, people can't tell you to go away with if you voice your fear, and actually being able to kind of find that common ground really, really helps. And to nick Jen Gale's like tagline of, you don't want to stand up and bash people with a green bashy stick and tell them to go and knit yogurt out of lentils. That's not going to work. So actually trying to find that thing that links you, and that's, Rachel, your circle of 7 spheres was really interesting. I was going, oh, that's a good way to talk to that person, and like I was flicking through who I thought that I see, where they might fit, and that was a really, really useful one. So thank you very much for that.
Good, you're welcome.
Great, thank you. There's a question in the chat from Susie. Susie, do you want to come off mute and ask a question?
Hi, yeah, thank you so much. That was really the boost that I needed tonight, so thank you. I think one of my issues is I'm not particularly succinct, hence the massive question, but paraphrasing, do you think the climate footprint narrative has been damaging to constructive conversations? Because I'm wondering where all these people are who are worried, because no one seems to want to engage. And I wonder whether people sort of think that I'm going to ask something of them personally to give up, and a barrier just comes up, even if I'm trying to talk about something in the community that actually they'd probably be really up for. It's just hard to get anyone to engage.
I think that's a really interesting question. Something that we hear a lot from people. I mean, I haven't recently asked about like that kind of climate footprint concept specifically, but what people say is like, I need to feel like I'm part of something bigger. Like I need to feel like I'm not just doing these things and there's no point. So almost like, okay, I am willing to, I really want to do my bit. I really want to play my part. Actually, that's a real British value, fairness and like respect. And, I want to kind of, respect my neighbors, respect the planet. But I think people kind of feel a bit like, well, if I'm doing all of this and nobody's noticing, and then celebrities are flying around on private jets, or the government's expanding airports all over the place, like kind of what's the point? So I think part of what our job is like, how can you show people that they are part of this big, quite quiet, but like majority who are doing a lot of things every day? Like I think there's a need for some kind of, maybe not a campaign, but like something that shows the scale of stuff that is happening all over the country. Like I'm really lucky. A big bit of my job is like speaking at conferences or going to events where I get to meet all these amazing people doing all these amazing bits of climate action. And I'm like, I wish I could just, spotlight this for so many other people, because people think that like they're the only ones doing it and they're really not. So there needs to be something about like there is a story of action taking place all over the country. How can you be part of it? How can you be inspired by it? And I actually think moving away from that frame of like, you know, can you tick how virtuous you are, in terms of, you know, but like it happens all the time, doesn't it? You know, like nobody, I haven't seen a single like high profile politician be interviewed on climate without getting asked, you know, have you got a heat pump? Do you ever get on an aeroplane? And it's like, you don't get asked about that if you work on another social policy issue. You know, when I worked for Shelter, I didn't get asked if I was a homeowner or if I owned 2 properties. But when I get interviewed on the media on climate, I get asked if I ever go on an aeroplane. And it's just, there's something about the questions that we're having to justify that I think are all messed up as well.
Yeah. That's helpful. Thank you.
I'm gonna let you go in a second, actually, because we're going to go into breakout rooms shortly, just so that we can just discuss a question about. It was actually a question that Rachel asked. Was it'd be really good for us all to discuss about, like, think about good climate action that you've seen, like good campaigns you've seen recently, because that's all about like, and it'll be an opportunity for us all to share in smaller groups about stuff that's inspired us, because I think that's what we need. We need the stories to go and talk about. But I was also just going to ask you what you think about Zach Polanski's, him and his method of communication and so on.
I think he has understood how to communicate in the kind of attention age. I think I mean, if you look at the Greens digital comms 18 months ago to now, it's absolutely transformational. And I think the way he's really slick. I think the way he goes to people and he listens is really impressive. I think the challenge with Zach Polanski is he will not appeal to some people. You know, we speak to a lot of people, you know, some of those segments like the Rooted Patriot segment, people will talk to you about how worried they are. They'll talk to you about how much they care about climate change. Anything that feels like it's activist or political, they won't do. I'm not signing a petition. I'm not going on a march. So I think Zach is doing a great job. I think he's really raised the profile of the issue, and I think he's massively attractive to some of those audience segments. I think the challenge for the rest of us in the movement is like, who is speaking to some of those other segments who probably he will not appeal to, and how can we sort of align with some of that?
Brilliant. Yeah, that's so true. The conference where I saw Rachel speak, Zach finished it. So I felt like Rachel started it with hope and confidence, and Zach finished it with hope and confidence. So I was thinking it was a great hope sandwich, which was amazing. Rachel, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure at some point we're going to invite you back again, because that was just such an inspiring session. So thank you. Lindsay, are you going to put us into breakout rooms? We're going to do just short breakout rooms. It's just 10 minutes. And what we're going to ask everyone to do is just to share about just climate stories, anything climate related that you have seen. It can be a national campaign, local action, anything that has inspired you. And this is an opportunity for us to get together, just have a quick conversation and have a chat about, and or just reflect on the session, reflect on anything you've just heard. So there will be you'll be invited to come into a breakout room shortly.
Thank you for having me so much, Sophie. I will send you the slides that you can share. There's a heap more on our website, but if anybody's interested in particular in any of the questions, or climate outreach runs kind of workshops and training on some of this, or if there's anything else that we can help you with, then please drop me a line. Sophie, please share my details. It'd be great to stay in touch.
Thank you. Well, we will tomorrow send out the recording of the session. There were a lot of people signed up for this session. It was well over 100. So there'll be a lot of people who'll be interested in getting that recording. We'll send out your slides. We'll also send out details of the next Anxiety to Action course that Lindsay talked about. And I did also put the link, actually found the link where to say about when you said about more things that you can find out about the research. So that will all get shared tomorrow. So there'll be lots for everyone to go through. So yeah, thank you very much. It's been it's just so much to think about. I'm looking to Lindsay whether I can ask another question just before. Right, I'm just going to ask you this one last question.
I was going to say breakout rooms already. Sorry, I was just conscious that a few people had left, so I'm making sure no one's left on their own.
Okay, yeah, just maybe do quite big breakout rooms, or
yeah, I'd started small, so I'll just maybe ask another question and I'll move people around.
I wanted to ask how you feel about reform making climate a wedge issue. Because I've heard a lot of different answers to this recently.
I think if we pull together, they're not going to succeed. And I think, in my experience, kind of campaigning movements are at their best when their backs are to the wall. So I think we've got a big opportunity to kind of, rise to the challenge. I listened to a really fascinating podcast about 9 months ago. It was an American podcast. They were talking about the energy transition in America. I think it was just before Trump won again, so they were still feeling quite smug about Biden and the IRA. But one of the people on the podcast said, hang on a minute, you closed your last coal power plant and there wasn't any ripple in the press about it. You just did that and there wasn't any blowback. And the kind of speaker from the UK was like, yeah. And he was like, it's in the post. And he was so right. It was almost like we should have factored in that there was going to be, some big opposition to this, vested interest this big, don't go down without a fight. So it's almost like we snuck through quite a few changes. And then, it's kind of, it's now sort of building up in terms of the response. So yeah, I think we're in an almighty fight. But I don't think it's one that we can't win.
Yeah, because an answer I heard that gave me a bit of hope recently was that, it is going to be an almighty fight. We are fighting for our lives, but actually it is possible. What you are doing, the work you are doing, and the confidence we need to have is people do care. People do care. A lot of it is about language. And you've said that it's about like the terms, and I catch myself out all the time saying words where people go like, "What is that?" It's like the word wedge issue. I'm thinking, well, everyone know what a wedge issue. You kind of have to just think we work in this, we live in this all the time. This is all the stuff we say, and actually, for a lot of people, it just doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. So it has to be down to how you say things, and so. At least it's an issue that we know from the research that you've done that people care about.
Yeah.
That we can win it. We just got to get this better. We just got to get better at it.
Yeah. And the reality, like when you separate the rhetoric from the reality, I think there was a new Reform mayor elected in Hull. A guy who used to be an Olympic boxer, I forget his name, but he's elected on this kind of Reform anti-climate ticket, and he gets in and sees all these brilliant green jobs being created in Hull, and he's like, "These are brilliant. I love the green industries of the future." So it's kind of like we have to be really worried about the rhetoric. But actually, there's loads of brilliant reality on the ground. And what we need to do is engage people on that and be like, these are really good jobs that your kids can do in their hometown. They don't need to move away. And they're also tackling climate change. This is brilliant. And I think as long as we focus on like the kind of unstoppable progress and, don't fight the fight that they want us to fight, then we'll have far more chance of winning.
What a brilliant final battle cry that was. Okay. Once again, thank you, Rachel.
You're very welcome.
I think breakout rooms might be ready to go.
Yeah, all good to go.